At a tense family dinner, my braggy sister-in-law suddenly stood up and yelled, "You stole my wallet, you filthy thief." I denied it, but she smirked, reached into the bag beside me, and proudly pulled out her wallet. "See? I knew it was you," she snapped, dripping with mockery. The whole table stared at me in shock, but I couldn't stop laughing. Hello, Reddit family. My stomach still clenches when I think about that night. It was my parents' 40th anniversary, a beautiful celebration of 4 decades of love, but then my sister-in-law, Vanessa, unleashed an accusation so vile, so utterly shocking, that it shattered the entire room. She pointed at me, her eyes blazing, and screamed that I had stolen her wallet. But what she didn't know, I saw it all coming. And the look on everyone's faces when the truth finally exploded? Absolutely priceless. You see, to truly understand what happened that night, you have to understand Vanessa. From the moment my brother Eric introduced her to our family 6 years ago, she's been on this relentless mission to declare herself the queen bee. She comes from serious money, her dad owns a chain of luxury car dealerships, and trust me, she never lets you forget it. In the beginning, I honestly tried with her. I genuinely wanted Eric to be happy, and if Vanessa was his choice, I was determined to make it work. I invited her to lunch, suggested shopping trips, even offered to help plan their wedding. But every single time, Vanessa would find some subtle, insidious way to put me down. She'd sneer about my simple apartment, ask if my clothes were from a discount store, or suggest my graphic design career was cute, but not really important, like her job or her father's empire. It was exhausting. The worst attacks always came at family gatherings. I remember 3 Christmases ago, she accidentally spilled red wine all over a dress I had spent weeks designing and making myself. Then, last Thanksgiving, she loudly announced it was so brave of me to come to dinner alone again, implying I was some pathetic spinster. At my niece Lucy's baptism, she had the gall to tell extended family that my gift for the baby was thoughtful, considering what you can afford. I swallowed it all, forcing smiles through gritted teeth. Not for her, never for her, but for Eric, who seemed utterly blind to his wife's behavior. And for my sweet niece, Lucy. She's still so innocent and loving, and the thought of causing drama that might hurt her kept me silent for years. My parents, David and Marie, are in their late 60s now. They're classic peacekeepers, the kind who believe family harmony is worth almost any sacrifice. My dad was a high school principal for 35 years, my mom a nurse. They raised us to believe in forgiveness and sacred family bonds. When Vanessa's behavior got too obvious, they'd just gently change the subject or try to separate us. It was frustrating, but I understood their nature. Eric, my older brother by 2 years, was always caught in the middle. We were so close growing up. He protected me from bullies, taught me to ride a bike. He was my confidant through my teenage years. But after Vanessa, he changed. He became distant, canceling our monthly sibling dinners, making excuses. When I dared to gently bring up Vanessa's treatment, he'd get defensive, accuse me of jealousy or being oversensitive. She just has a different communication style, Gabs, he'd say. You need to try harder to understand her. My own brother, dismissing my feelings. That stung. My younger sister, Julia, was my only true ally. 3 years my junior, Julia was the family rebel, speaking her mind no matter the consequences. She saw right through Vanessa and had no problem calling her out, which, of course, made her Vanessa's second favorite target. Though, frankly, Julia cared far less about the jabs than I did. You know what your problem is? Julia once told me, rolling her eyes. You still care what that witch thinks. Stop giving her the power. Easier said than done when every family event felt like a psychological battlefield, let me tell you. The build-up to that infamous dinner started 3 months earlier. My parents announced their 40th anniversary, a huge milestone that deserved something truly special. I volunteered to organize a dinner at Salvatore's, their favorite Italian restaurant, where they'd had their first date. I poured my heart into it, custom menus, a playlist of meaningful songs, arranging for their oldest friends to attend, creating a slideshow of family photos, even designing beautiful custom invitations. Naturally, Vanessa had to insert herself. First, she called the restaurant behind my back to change the reservation time. Then, she contacted my invited guests to suggest a different dress code. She even ordered an entirely different cake from the one I had carefully selected based on my parents' favorite flavors, claiming hers was more sophisticated. When I confronted her, she played innocent. "Oh, I thought we were planning this together. Eric said you probably needed help, since you have so little experience with this kind of upscale event." My brother denied saying any such thing, but he also refused to tell Vanessa to back off. So I adjusted. I compromised. I just kept my focus on making the evening perfect for my parents. By the time the day arrived, I was absolutely exhausted from navigating her interference, but determined not to let her ruin it. Salvatore's was charming, tucked away in Chicago's Little Italy. Giovanni, the owner's son, had helped me reserve their most romantic corner table, recreating their first date menu. The private dining room glowed with soft amber light. Red and white roses adorned every table. I arrived 2 hours early to personally place framed photos of my parents throughout their marriage on a memory table, along with the anniversary gift I'd spent months creating, a hand-illustrated family tree. By 7 o'clock, guests started arriving. My parents entered to applause, Mom stunning in a navy dress, Dad beaming with pride. The joy on their faces made all the stress worth it. Until Vanessa arrived. She and Eric were 15 minutes late because, I later learned, Vanessa had insisted on changing outfits 3 times. She swept in, wearing a red designer dress that was far too formal, diamonds glittering everywhere. Lucy trailed behind in a miniature version of her mother's outfit, looking uncomfortable. "So sorry we're late," Vanessa announced loudly, air kissing my mother. Traffic was dreadful, and I simply had to make sure we looked appropriate. Some of us understand the importance of presentation at significant events. Her eyes flickered to my simple black cocktail dress, which I'd chosen precisely not to draw attention from my mother. I saw Mom's slight frown, but true to form, she just thanked Vanessa and complimented Lucy. The seating had been carefully planned. My parents at the center, surrounded by their oldest friends. Eric, Vanessa, and Lucy at one end, Julia and I at the other. This was meant to keep Vanessa and me at a safe distance. But Vanessa had other plans. As everyone moved to their seats, she declared, "Oh, there must be a mistake. As the eldest son's wife, I should be seated next to Marie. Families should be closest on such an important occasion, don't you think?" Before I could react, she moved the place cards, displacing my mother's best friend, Helen, who had flown in from Arizona for this. The ripple effect forced several other guests to shuffle, creating confusion and awkward glances. I caught Julia's eye across the table. She subtly shook her head, warning me not to make a scene. During appetizers, Vanessa dominated the conversation, steering it to her achievements. She'd just been promoted to marketing director at her father's company, a position everyone knew was created specifically for her, with no real responsibilities. "It's just so rewarding to be recognized for hard work," she said, looking pointedly at me. "Not everyone understands the dedication it takes to succeed in the corporate world. Some people choose easier, more creative paths, which is fine, too, I suppose." My father, ever the diplomat, tried to include me. "Gabriella just completed a major branding project for that new tech startup. What was it called again, sweetheart?" Before I could answer, Vanessa cut in. "Oh, David, speaking of technology, did I tell you about the new partnership I negotiated with Tesla? Daddy says it's the biggest deal our company has ever made." The entire dinner continued like this, Vanessa interrupting, redirecting, subtly undermining everyone, especially me. I focused on making sure the service ran smoothly, quietly conferring with the wait staff. It was during one of these moments, as I returned to my seat from speaking with the head waiter, that I noticed something odd. Vanessa had left the table briefly, claiming she needed to freshen up. As she returned, I saw her reach into her oversized designer handbag and carefully tuck something into an inner pocket. From my angle, I caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a second wallet, different from the red leather designer wallet I'd seen her use earlier. My first thought was that maybe it was just an old wallet she'd found. But the furtive way she glanced around as she did it triggered a deep suspicion. Over the years, I'd become attuned to Vanessa's body language when she was planning something malicious. She had a tell, a slight tightening around her eyes, her plotting face. I saw that look now, and it sent a chill down my spine. For a moment, I considered confronting her, but several things held me back. This was my parents' special night, and they'd endured enough tension between us. Without knowing exactly what she was planning, any accusation would sound paranoid and petty. And, perhaps most importantly, a small voice inside me whispered that sometimes the best response to a trap is to let it be sprung, but on your own terms. So, I watched and waited, maintaining a pleasant expression, while my mind raced. After returning to her seat, Vanessa placed her large handbag on the floor between her chair and mine, despite there being a perfectly good hook under the table. The bag was notably within reach of my chair. Another detail that seemed deliberately staged. Throughout the main course, I engaged warmly with other guests, keeping a peripheral awareness of Vanessa's bag. I saw her check it several times, ostensibly for her phone or a tissue, but always with that calculating expression. Whatever game she was playing, she was setting the stage carefully. And for the first time in our long history of conflict, I felt one step ahead of her. The tension in the private dining room escalated. What should have been a celebration of love felt like navigating a conversational minefield. Elegant plates of osso buco and handmade pasta faded into the background. Uncle Robert, my father's brother, who never quite mastered reading a room, brought up the family cabin in Michigan. "So, David, have you decided who gets the cabin in the will?" Not to be morbid, but I was talking to my financial advisor about inheritance planning. A heavy silence fell. The cabin, 3 generations old, was a source of countless happy memories for Eric, Julia, and me. It was also, unfortunately, a source of tension because Vanessa had made it clear she wanted to renovate it into a proper lake house and essentially claim it as her own. "We haven't made any final decisions," my father said carefully, looking uncomfortable. "That's not really dinner conversation, Robert." But Vanessa saw her opportunity. "Well, since it came up, Eric and I have actually been discussing some wonderful ideas for modernizing the cabin. It needs substantial work, and we would be willing to invest in those renovations if, well, you know." She smiled sweetly. It would be such a special place for Lucy to grow up visiting, just like Eric did. The implication was crystal clear. The cabin should go to them because they had a child. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the one that always appeared when Vanessa leveraged her status as the mother of the only grandchild to gain an advantage. "The cabin is perfect as it is," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "The whole point is its rustic charm and family history. Modernizing it would erase what makes it special." Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. That is such a typical response from someone resistant to positive change. "The cabin has plumbing from the 1960s, Gabriella. Surely even you can see that needs updating at minimum." "There's a difference between necessary updates and completely changing the character of a place," I replied. My mother, sensing the brewing storm, quickly changed the subject to Julia's recent promotion. But Vanessa wasn't finished. Speaking of careers, she interjected after letting Julia speak for barely 30 seconds. "I heard that graphic design jobs are being rapidly replaced by artificial intelligence. Gabriella, are you concerned? It must be so stressful working in a dying field." All eyes turned to me. Classic Vanessa, a topic designed to put me on the defensive. "Actually," I replied, maintaining a calm smile, "human creativity and understanding of emotional resonance are exactly what AI cannot replicate. My client list is growing because companies recognize that connection. But thank you for your concern about my career." The conversation continued to bounce between pleasant reminiscences and Vanessa's pointed barbs. By the time dessert was about to be served, I felt emotionally drained from the constant vigilance required to navigate her attacks. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, standing up. "I need to check with the kitchen about the anniversary cake." In truth, I simply needed a moment of peace away from Vanessa's calculating gaze and subtle jabs. I walked out to the restaurant's small outdoor patio. Taking a deep breath, I leaned against the stone balustrade and looked up at the few stars fighting through Chicago's light pollution. In that quiet moment, I considered my options. I could continue the pattern of the past 6 years, deflecting her attacks. I could escalate, finally calling her out publicly. Or I could find some middle path that protected my dignity without ruining my parents' celebration. As I stood there, contemplating, I remembered the strange behavior with the second wallet. Whatever she was planning, it was clearly meant to unfold tonight. The thought sent a chill through me. After about 5 minutes, I knew I needed to return. As I walked back, I saw Giovanni, the owner, speaking with a waiter and gesturing toward our private room. He caught my eye and gave me a quick, reassuring nod. I had explained the family dynamics to him during the planning, and he had promised to help ensure the evening went smoothly. That small gesture of support strengthened my resolve. I returned to find dessert being served, a delicate tiramisu. As I took my seat, I immediately noticed a shift. Vanessa was sitting straighter, an almost imperceptible smile playing at her lips. Eric looked tense, staring at his dessert. My father was mid-story about their honeymoon, but Vanessa was barely pretending to listen, her eyes flicking between me and her handbag, which was still positioned between our chairs. I had just taken my first bite of tiramisu when Vanessa suddenly gasped loudly, cutting off my father mid-sentence. "My wallet," she exclaimed, her hand flying to her chest in an exaggerated gesture of distress. "I cannot find my wallet." All conversation ceased. Every head turned toward Vanessa, who was now making a show of searching through her handbag. "Are you sure you brought it?" my mother asked, concerned. "Did you check your coat?" "Of course I brought it." Vanessa snapped, then quickly composed her features into a mask of worry. "I had it right here. I paid the coat check with it. Someone must have taken it." She began looking around frantically, peering under the table, asking others to check near their seats. I noticed she was careful to direct everyone's attention away from her own handbag, where I suspected the missing wallet was still safely hidden. "Perhaps you left it in the restroom," suggested Helen. No, Vanessa insisted, her voice rising dramatically. "It was right here in my bag. It has all my credit cards, my driver's license, even pictures of Lucy that cannot be replaced." As the search expanded and guests began standing, I saw Vanessa's eyes repeatedly dart toward me, gauging my reaction. I maintained a neutral expression, even helping to look around my area, even as I felt the trap beginning to close. "Wait," Vanessa said suddenly, her voice dropping to a theatrical hush. "When did you leave the table earlier, Gabriella? And where exactly did you go?" The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. Several people looked confused, not immediately understanding the implication, but I knew exactly what she was doing. "I went to the patio for some fresh air," I replied evenly. "And then I spoke with Giovanni about the cake." "Why do you ask?" Vanessa's eyes narrowed, and I saw the satisfaction in them that told me I had walked right into her script. "Isn't it strange," she said slowly, "that my wallet disappears right when you leave the table? And you were gone for quite some time, weren't you?" The atmosphere shifted instantly. I could feel the uncomfortable tension as guests began to realize what Vanessa was suggesting. My mother looked stricken, my father confused and distressed. Julia was halfway out of her seat, fury evident on her face, but I caught her eye and subtly shook my head. "This was between Vanessa and me. Are you suggesting I took your wallet?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "That's a serious accusation, Vanessa." She didn't respond directly. Instead, turning to the table at large, "Has anyone seen my wallet? It's red leather Prada with a gold clasp, very distinctive and obviously valuable." No one had, of course, because I was increasingly certain it was exactly where Vanessa had hidden it, waiting for her dramatic reveal. The private dining room at Salvatore's fell completely silent. The waitstaff, sensing the tension, had discreetly withdrawn. Even the soft Italian music seemed to have dimmed. Vanessa stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor, a sound that cut through the silence like a knife. Every eye in the room was on her as she drew herself up to her full height, her expression transforming from worried search to righteous anger. "You," she said, pointing directly at me, her voice rising to a near shout. "You stole my wallet, you filthy thief." The accusation hung in the air, so outrageous and unexpected that for a moment no one reacted. My father was the first to recover. "Now, Vanessa," he began, his principal's voice of authority making a rare appearance. "That is a very serious allegation to make without any evidence." But Vanessa was not to be deterred. She was fully committed to her performance, her face flushed with what appeared to the others as genuine outrage. "I have suspected for years that things go missing when Gabriella is around," she continued. "A pair of earrings from our guest bathroom. Money from Eric's wallet. Even Lucy's birthday gift card last year. I never said anything because I wanted to keep the peace, but this is too much." I felt as if I had been physically struck. Not only was she accusing me of stealing her wallet tonight, but she was retroactively blaming me for other alleged thefts, none of which I had ever heard about before this moment. I glanced at Eric, expecting him to defend me, but he was staring at the tablecloth, his face unreadable. "That is absolutely not true," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I have never taken anything that does not belong to me. Not tonight and not ever." My denial seemed to fuel Vanessa's performance. She turned to the table at large, her expression now one of sad vindication. "You see how she lies? Always so perfect, so innocent. Gabriella, the graphic designer. Gabriella, the devoted daughter. Gabriella, who everyone loves. But I know what she really is." The guests shifted uncomfortably. Some looked confused, others embarrassed. My mother had tears in her eyes, and my father looked older than I had ever seen him, the lines in his face deepened by distress. I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Humiliation burned through me. Anger pulsed in my temples at the sheer injustice. But beneath those immediate reactions, a strange calm was forming. I knew what was coming. I had seen the setup, recognized the trap, and while part of me wanted to leap to my feet and scream the truth, another part, a stronger part, counseled patience. Let her play out her hand completely. "I do not appreciate being called a thief or a liar," I said, keeping my voice low and controlled, especially not at our parents' anniversary celebration. Vanessa's eyes gleamed with triumph at what she clearly interpreted as a weak defense. And then she made her move, the one I had been waiting for. "Well, if you're so innocent," she said with a smirk, "you won't mind if we check your things." Before I could respond, she reached down toward my feet, where my small clutch purse sat beside the chair. I had deliberately chosen a tiny evening bag that could hold only my phone, lipstick, and keys, specifically to avoid carrying anything unnecessary. "That's hardly large enough to hide a wallet," Julia pointed out sharply. "No," Vanessa agreed, straightening up with a predatory smile. "But this is." She reached for the large tote bag that had been sitting between our chairs, the one I knew belonged to her, but that she now implied was mine. "That's not my bag," I said calmly. "Oh," Vanessa raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Then whose is it?" "It's been sitting right next to you all evening." Before I could respond, she made a show of opening the tote bag and dramatically reaching inside. The look of satisfaction on her face as her hand closed around what she was seeking made my stomach churn, even though I had anticipated this exact moment. "Well, well, well," she said, her voice dripping with mock surprise as she triumphantly pulled out her red Prada wallet. "What do we have here?" "My wallet in your bag." "See, I knew it was you." The collective gasp from around the table was audible. My mother covered her mouth, eyes wide with shock. My father looked stricken, torn between his instinct to believe in his daughter and the seemingly irrefutable evidence. "Gabriella," Eric finally spoke, his voice a mixture of confusion and disappointment. "How could you?" That hurt more than anything else, the immediate assumption of my guilt from my own brother. 6 years of Vanessa's influence had eroded his faith in me so completely that he didn't even question this absurd scenario. The triumph in Vanessa's eyes as she surveyed the shocked faces was unmistakable. She had orchestrated her moment perfectly, creating a scene where I appeared undeniably guilty. In her mind, she had finally won, humiliating me so thoroughly that I would never recover. What she hadn't counted on was that I had seen it coming from the beginning. The shocked silence that followed Vanessa's theatrical revelation seemed to stretch into eternity. My family and their friends stared at the red wallet in her hand, then at me, their faces a mixture of confusion, disappointment, and discomfort. The perfect anniversary celebration had derailed spectacularly, and I was now the apparent villain of the evening. And then I did the last thing anyone expected. I laughed. It started as a small chuckle, then grew into full, genuine laughter that I couldn't have suppressed if I tried. The absurdity of the situation, the elaborate trap Vanessa had set, and the fact that she thought she had finally outmaneuvered me, it all struck me as hilarious in that moment of tension. My laughter broke the frozen tableau. Vanessa's triumphant expression faltered, confusion and then anger replacing it. "What is wrong with you?" she demanded. "I just caught you red-handed stealing my wallet and you're laughing?" I took a deep breath, composing myself, though a smile remained. "I'm laughing, Vanessa," I said, "because that is not your bag, and we both know it." I pointed to the designer tote that had been between our chairs all evening. "That's your bag. You placed it there deliberately, and you put your second wallet inside it earlier this evening." Her face paled slightly, but she rallied quickly. "What are you talking about? This is obviously your bag, and my wallet was inside it." "Actually," I said calmly, "if you look inside that bag, you'll find it contains things that belong to you, not me. Perhaps your makeup compact with your initials, or the specific brand of hand sanitizer you always carry, or maybe even the little notebook where you write down perceived slights from family members to bring up later." I had been observing Vanessa carefully for years, noting these small details. The look of shock that flashed across her face told me I had hit close to the mark with at least some of my guesses. "You're trying to confuse everyone." Vanessa insisted, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. "The fact remains that my wallet was in this bag next to your chair." "Yes," I agreed. "In your bag, which you carefully positioned to appear as if it might be mine, after I watched you place a second wallet inside it when you returned from the restroom earlier." Gasps and murmurs spread around the table as the implications began to sink in. My mother's expression shifted from distress to confusion, my father's from disappointment to careful consideration. "This is ridiculous." Vanessa sputtered. "You're making up stories to cover your theft." "Actually," I said, "there's a way to settle this definitively." I turned toward the back of the room where Giovanni, the restaurant owner, had been quietly observing. "Giovanni, would you mind sharing what we discussed during the planning for tonight's event?" Giovanni stepped forward, his professional demeanor tinged with discomfort. "When Miss Williams was organizing this celebration, she asked about our security measures. I informed her that after a theft last year, we installed discreet security cameras in all our private dining rooms. They are primarily for the protection of our guests' belongings, but they record continuously." The color drained from Vanessa's face so rapidly that for a moment I thought she might faint. "You knew," she whispered, staring at me. "You knew there were cameras, and you let me." "I knew there were cameras," I confirmed. "What I didn't know was exactly what you were planning. But when I saw you hiding something in that bag, I suspected it might be something like this. I just didn't think you'd go quite so far as to publicly accuse me of theft." Eric had been listening to this exchange with growing horror on his face. Now, he stood up abruptly. "Giovanni, can we see the security footage right now?" Giovanni nodded. "Of course. We can access it in my office immediately." "I don't think that's necessary," Vanessa said quickly, her voice high and tight. "This has gotten out of hand. It was obviously just a misunderstanding." But Eric was already moving toward Giovanni, his expression grim. "I want to see the footage now." I remained seated as Eric, my father, and Giovanni left the room. The atmosphere they left behind was thick with tension. Vanessa remained standing, her hands gripping the back of her chair so tightly her knuckles were white. My mother looked between us, her expression unreadable. Julia had a small, satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The minutes stretched on interminably. No one spoke. The remaining guests fidgeted uncomfortably, clearly wishing they could leave, but trapped by social convention. Finally, the door opened and Eric returned. His face was set in hard lines I had never seen before, his eyes cold as they fixed on his wife. "The cameras show everything," he said, his voice flat. "They show Vanessa taking a wallet from her purse, placing it in the tote bag, and positioning the bag between the chairs. They show her checking repeatedly to make sure Gabriella hadn't noticed, and they clearly show her removing the wallet during her dramatic accusation." Every eye in the room turned to Vanessa, whose face now showed genuine fear. "Eric," she began. "I can explain." "Don't," he cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. "Just don't. We'll discuss this at home." The silence that followed was deafening. I had waited years for this moment of vindication, for someone in my family to finally see Vanessa for who she truly was. But now that it had arrived, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for my brother and niece. I stood up slowly, drawing all eyes to me. "Mom, Dad," I said gently. "I'm so sorry that this happened during your celebration. This evening was supposed to be about your 40 years of love and commitment, not about any of this." My mother's eyes filled with tears, but they were different from the ones I had seen earlier. "Oh, Gabriella," she said. "We're the ones who should be sorry. We should have seen what was happening." I moved around the table to embrace her. And as I did, I felt the weight of years of silent suffering begin to lift. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally out in the open. The remainder of the anniversary dinner proceeded in a strange, subdued atmosphere. Vanessa sat rigid in her chair, barely touching her dessert, while Eric maintained a cold silence. Lucy, sensing the tension but not understanding it, grew increasingly fussy until Julia quietly offered to take her outside for a walk. My parents made a valiant effort to salvage the celebration, thanking guests and reminiscing. Their closest friends rallied admirably, creating pockets of genuine warmth amidst the awkwardness. As the evening drew to a close and guests began to depart, each person who approached me did so with a new awareness in their eyes. Some offered quiet apologies for having doubted me. Others simply squeezed my hand or shoulder in silent support. Helen, my mother's best friend, pulled me into a tight hug. "I always knew that woman was trouble," she whispered fiercely. "Good for you for standing your ground." My father looked shell-shocked. As he helped my mother with her coat, I saw him place a protective hand on her back, as if the evening had reminded him of the preciousness and fragility of family bonds. When only immediate family remained, my father finally spoke directly about what had happened. "I owe you an apology, Gabriella," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "We've seen the tension between you and Vanessa for years, but we told ourselves it was normal in-law dynamics. We never imagined it went this deep." My mother nodded, tears welling again. "We should have protected you better. We were so focused on keeping the peace that we didn't see who was really disturbing it." "It's not your fault," I assured them, my voice thick with emotion. "Vanessa is extremely skilled at presenting one face to some people and another to others, and I never wanted to force anyone to take sides." Eric, who had been standing silently by the door, now approached us. "I need to talk to you," he said to me, his voice rough with emotion. "Alone, if that's okay." We stepped out onto the same patio where I had collected myself earlier. The night had grown cooler. Eric looked out at the city lights for a long moment before speaking. "I don't even know where to begin," he finally said. "I feel like the world's biggest fool." "You're not a fool," I said gently. "You're someone who wanted to believe the best about the person you love. There's nothing foolish about that." He shook his head sharply. "Stop being so understanding. I don't deserve it. For years, I've dismissed your feelings, defended her behavior, even accused you of being jealous or difficult. And all this time," his voice cracked, "all this time, she was deliberately trying to hurt you, to drive a wedge between us. I had imagined this moment of validation countless times. But now that it was here, I found no satisfaction in my brother's pain." "What are you going to do?" I asked quietly. Eric ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking exhausted. "I don't know. I need to think about Lucy, about what's best for her. But I know I can't just pretend this didn't happen. What Vanessa did tonight, it wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was calculated, cruel. It makes me wonder what else she's capable of." Before I could respond, the door to the patio opened and Vanessa emerged. Her makeup had been freshly applied, but it couldn't hide the redness around her eyes or the tight, defensive set of her mouth. "The car is waiting," she said to Eric, her voice brittle. "Lucy is tired." Eric looked at her for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression, a hardening that I had never witnessed before. "Take Lucy home," he said. "I'll get a ride with my parents or Gabriella. We need some space tonight." Vanessa's composure slipped, revealing a flash of panic. "Eric, please. We need to talk about this." "Yes, we do," he agreed. "But not tonight. Tonight, I need to process what I saw on that security footage." For a moment, I thought Vanessa might argue further, but after a tense silence, she simply nodded stiffly and walked away. The sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood floors faded as she returned to collect Lucy. After she left, Eric turned back to me. "I am so sorry, Gabs. I know those words aren't enough, but they're all I have right now." I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "They're enough for tonight. The rest we can figure out as we go." When we returned inside, my parents and Julia were waiting. The five of us, our core family unit, without Vanessa's divisive presence, stood together in a moment of wordless reconnection. Then Julia broke the silence with her characteristic directness. "Well, that was the most dramatic anniversary dinner in history. Congratulations, Mom and Dad. You'll definitely remember this one." Surprisingly, this broke the tension. My father chuckled. My mother smiled through her tears. And even Eric managed a weak laugh. We gathered our things, thanked Giovanni profusely for his discretion and help, and made our way out into the night. As we stood on the sidewalk saying our goodbyes, my mother pulled me into a fierce hug. "I am so proud of how you handled yourself tonight," she whispered. "You showed grace under incredible pressure." "I learned from the best," I told her, holding her tight. As I drove home alone later, the events of the evening replayed in my mind. The satisfaction of finally having the truth exposed was tempered by concern for my brother and niece. Family dynamics were complicated, and I knew tonight's revelations would have far-reaching consequences. But for the first time in 6 years, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The constant need to defend myself, to question my own perceptions, to walk on eggshells around Vanessa, all of it was shifting. The truth had a power of its own, and once revealed, it could not be unseen. When I reached my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and poured myself a small glass of wine. Sitting by the window overlooking the city, I raised the glass in a silent toast to my parents' 40 years of marriage, to truth, and to the uncertain but hopeful future of our family. In the weeks following that infamous anniversary dinner, our family entered a period of painful but absolutely necessary transformation. The immediate aftermath was exactly as difficult as I had anticipated. Eric moved into our parents' guest room, explaining to Lucy that Daddy needed to help Grandpa with some projects. It was a flimsy excuse that the perceptive 4-year-old clearly didn't fully believe, but it provided a gentle buffer for her. Vanessa, for her part, cycled through a range of strategies to manage the fallout. First came tearful apologies and claims she had suffered a momentary breakdown due to stress. When those fell on deaf ears, she attempted to minimize her actions, suggesting everyone was overreacting to what was merely a misguided prank. Finally, when those approaches failed, she resorted to what I suspected was her true nature, cold calculation. Hiring an expensive divorce attorney and threatening to limit Eric's access to Lucy if he pursued separation. That final move backfired spectacularly. The security footage from the restaurant, which Giovanni had preserved, provided compelling evidence of Vanessa's deliberate attempt to frame me and damage my reputation. When Eric's attorney suggested this demonstrated a pattern of manipulative behavior that might be relevant in custody considerations, Vanessa's aggressive stance softened considerably. By the 3-month mark after the dinner, Eric had filed for divorce and moved into his own apartment. He and Vanessa established a tentative co-parenting arrangement, with Lucy spending equal time with both parents. The transition was hardest on Lucy. Aunt Gabby, she asked me during one of our outings as we shared ice cream on a park bench, "Did Mommy do something bad?" The question caught me off guard, and I chose my words carefully. "Grown-ups sometimes make mistakes in how they treat each other, sweetie. Your mom and dad are working through some grown-up problems, but they both love you very much. That will never change." Lucy seemed to consider this seriously, then nodded with the simple acceptance children often show for complex situations. "Daddy's sad a lot now," she observed. "But he smiles more when you visit." My heart ached for her, but also for Eric. My relationship with my parents also evolved. My father, the lifelong educator, took the situation as a personal failure. "I should have seen what was happening," he told me during a private conversation, his voice heavy with regret. "I observed students and their dynamics for 35 years, but I missed what was right in front of me in my own family." "Dad," I reminded him gently, "Vanessa fooled a lot of people for a long time. That was her specialty." My mother, ever the nurturer, focused on healing. She instituted weekly family dinners, minus Vanessa, where we gradually relearned how to communicate openly. These gatherings were awkward at first, but over time, they became a sanctuary where authentic connection could flourish again. Julia, true to form, approached the situation with characteristic directness. "I've been waiting 6 years to say I told you so," she announced to Eric at one of these dinners. "But now that I can, it doesn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would." Her honesty somehow broke through some of the tension, and Eric actually laughed, perhaps his first genuine laugh since that night. As for me, the vindication I had longed for came with unexpected emotional complications. For years, I had channeled my frustration with Vanessa into my work, using graphic design projects as an outlet for emotions I couldn't express within the family. Now that the truth was known, I found myself at a creative crossroads, unsure where to direct that energy. The initial weeks after the dinner were difficult. I experienced a roller coaster of emotions, relief, anger at the years of gaslighting, guilt over my brother's pain, and anxiety about the future. There were nights I lay awake replaying every interaction with Vanessa, seeing with new clarity the calculated nature of her behavior from the very beginning. During this period, I sought help from a therapist, Dr. Catherine Torres, who specialized in family dynamics and emotional recovery. Her guidance was invaluable. "What you experienced was a form of psychological abuse," she explained. "Having your perceptions repeatedly denied or dismissed can make you question your own reality. That's called gaslighting. And recovery takes time." With Dr. Torres's help, I began to rebuild my sense of self-trust. I reconnected with friends who had drifted away, many of whom had sensed something was wrong but hadn't known how to help. I focused on self-care, setting aside time for activities that nourished my spirit, hiking along Lake Michigan, taking a pottery class, reading for pleasure again. Professionally, I channeled my renewed energy into my design business. I had always been good at my work, but now I found a new level of confidence in my creative vision. I took risks with clients I might have avoided before, proposing bold concepts that pushed boundaries. To my surprise, these were often the ideas that resonated most strongly. Within 6 months, I landed 2 major contracts with national brands and hired my first employee to help manage the increased workload. The most profound healing, however, came through an unexpected channel. About 4 months after the anniversary dinner, I received a message from a woman named Sophia, who introduced herself as Vanessa's former college roommate. She had heard about the incident through mutual acquaintances and reached out because, as she put it, "I've been where you are." Over coffee at a quiet cafe, Sophia shared her own experiences with Vanessa during their university years. The patterns were strikingly familiar: the careful cultivation of allies, the subtle undermining, the elaborate setups designed to make Sophia appear unstable or unreliable. The conversation was both validating and healing, a confirmation that what I had experienced wasn't isolated or imagined. It took me years to trust my own perceptions again after living with her, Sophia confessed. But you know what helped the most? Finding others who had been through similar experiences, knowing I wasn't alone. Inspired by this connection, I started a small, private support group for people recovering from relationships with manipulative individuals. We met monthly, sharing stories and strategies for healing. Through helping others, I found my own path forward, transforming pain into purpose. As the 1-year anniversary of that fateful dinner approached, I reflected on everything that had changed. Eric was dating again, cautiously, a kindergarten teacher he met at one of Lucy's school events. My parents seemed lighter, their relationship strengthened by weathering the crisis. Julia had been promoted and was considering a master's degree. And me? I had learned lessons that would shape the rest of my life. I learned the value of patience, of strategic thinking, of waiting for the right moment rather than reacting immediately. I learned that sometimes the most powerful response to manipulation is simply allowing the truth to reveal itself. Most importantly, I learned that standing in your truth, even when others doubt you, is not selfishness, but self-preservation. For years, I had silenced myself to keep the peace, believing that harmony required my silence. Now, I understood that real harmony can only exist where truth is honored and respected. The last time I saw Vanessa was at Lucy's 5th birthday party, a carefully orchestrated neutral event at a children's play center. We acknowledged each other with tight nods from across the room, but didn't speak. I noticed she wore a mask of cheerful politeness that never quite reached her eyes, and I wondered if she had already found new targets for her manipulations. But that was no longer my concern. I had reclaimed my voice, my family, and my power. The journey through pain had led to a place of authentic strength, and that, perhaps, is the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest growth comes through our deepest wounds. The very experiences designed to break us can become the foundation for building a more genuine, powerful version of ourselves if we have the courage to face them honestly and the wisdom to transform them into something meaningful. Have you ever experienced someone trying to manipulate a situation against you? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from the experience? Thank you for watching. Take care. Good luck.